And now for Tony Gosling with a report on Spinwatch.
My name's Tom Griffin. I work for Spinwatch, which is an organisation based in Glasgow which looks at spin and disinformation propaganda, whether from the government or from corporations or wherever.
Why should anybody go to your website?
Basically, to get the context that you're not getting from the media about who people are, why they're pushing particular arguments, and why some of those arguments may be misleading.
So are you saying that some independent experts are actually maybe not as independent as they seem?
Yes, a lot of corporate PR uses things like front groups. Health groups which are pushing particular angles are not necessarily bona fide health groups, but fronts for diet companies, things like that. Well, the classic example, and the one where it really came out, was with Policy Exchange Newsnight, where Policy Exchange did this report on British mosques and about the literature that they were carrying in their bookshops, saying that they were carrying extremist literature, and it was covered across all the press, the Times, the Telegraph, many other papers, and it was going to be covered on Newsnight as well, but almost by chance, I think, Newsnight realised that some of the receipts that some of the evidence that Policy Exchange were relying on was not correct, and they looked into the receipts for these books, and they found that some of them were receipts from two different places had been written in one on top of the other. The receipts were not the actual documents that the particular bookshops put out. So basically, Policy Exchange couldn't stand up its evidence. So you have to look at why are they putting out evidence which is skewed to reflect a particular picture. I think it made people think twice about accepting these stories at face value, even though there's still a lot of it going on pretty much as before. But papers did have to apologise to various mosques over that story, and the media has now started to report a bit more about the background of Policy Exchange. There was a profile in The Guardian recently which picked up on some of the same issues that we've been researching about. Dean Godson, who's the Director of Research for Terrorism. He actually has a long background in propaganda. He was working with the Institute for European Defence and Strategic Studies in the 1980s, pushing propaganda for Star Wars, the missile defence system then. That was an offshoot of the Heritage Foundation, which his brother actually worked for. His brother, Roy Godson, who actually came under investigation in the 80s as part of the Iran-Contra affair. Now, Roy Godson has actually written about disinformation propaganda techniques as an academic.
You've got a couple of books with you, I see there. I wonder if you could just talk about those. And these are written by the brother of the director of the Policy Exchange, which was involved in this sort of faking evidence that mosques were peddling really extremist Islamic literature.
I mean, this one is Dirty Tricks or Trump Cards, which is all about how to sort of influence politics in an unacknowledged way. I mean, I think he gives a definition of covert action here somewhere. If I can find it, it's he's got the definition here. Covert action, or to use the British term, special political action, is the attempt by a government or group to influence events in another state or territory without revealing its own involvement. And what he's actually doing in this book is making the case for the US government to utilise that kind of capability.
So the book's actually called Dirty Tricks or Trump Cards, US Covert Action and Counterintelligence by Roy Godson, a new introduction by the author. So he's really saying in the title that whilst some people might say these are dirty tricks, infiltrating these lies into the press, he's saying that actually it can have a decisive political effect.
Yeah, I mean, there's a chapter on sort of which goes into propaganda and disinformation and different types, black propaganda, grey, to white propaganda.
Can you just explain what the difference between? I've heard those terms before. Maybe people haven't. What is the difference between white, black, and grey propaganda?
Well, I mean, it's actually quite definite within the sort of the intelligence world. It's quite definite, clear categories. White propaganda basically is completely open propaganda. So stuff like the British Council, the US Information Agency, stuff like that. is white propaganda. Grey propaganda is propaganda that it's deniable, you don't acknowledge it, but people who look into things can probably figure it out fairly easily. And black propaganda is propaganda that is deliberately, completely hidden, well hidden, usually because it would reflect extremely badly on the real source, and which often overlaps with disinformation, which is when you're putting out information which is just not true and which is designed to mislead. Now, the other book I've got here is Strategic Denial and Deception, which is edited by Roy Godson. But the interesting thing about it is that it's got a chapter by Abram Shulsky, who went on to become the head of the Office of Special Plans at the Pentagon in the lead up to the Iraq War. So they were the people putting out the case for the Iraq War. And I'll just read you a little bit from his Abram Shulsky's chapter. Deception refers to the effort to cause an adversary to believe something that is not true, to believe a cover story rather than the truth, with the goal of leading him to react in a way that serves one's own interest rather than his. This involves creating the impression via leaks, planted information, decoys, etc., that the truth is other than it actually is. That is creating an alternative reality in which the target is induced to believe. Now, what I would ask is, isn't that exactly what the Office of Special Plans did in the run-up to the Iraq War when he was there?
Can you just give us the web address and briefly explain, how the site operates?
Yeah, it's www.spinwatch.org. It's basically a non-profit organisation which just looks at spin, disinformation, whether it's by corporations or governments. We have a lot of different writers. Some concentrate on environmental issues, water, the role of water companies and things like that. People there from Unlock Democracy as well.
But basically the idea is that you come up with a corporation or a name of someone you've seen on TV, and on the site you get information into their background and what their prejudices might be, and something to find out a little bit more, look a bit more deeply into who these people are.
That was Tony Gosling reporting on Spinwatch, and thanks to Tom Griffin for his contribution to that. They're based at Strathclyde University, and if you want to have a look and find out more, the website address once again is www.spinwatch.org.